Welcome to Aurora Connects Season 4. This is episode 5 for Friday, December 17th, 2021, Dramaturgy. I'm Aurora Associate Artistic Director, Monique Williams, and as always, I am joined by Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Dawn. Are you looking forward to a little break coming up?
I am looking forward to a little break coming up. I'm especially looking forward to seeing my Kato on her holiday break.
Yeah, I've got some family coming in from out of town. It should be nice.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, as per usual, I want to let folks know that we welcome comments in the chat. I'm following everything there. And we always like to hear from you. So you can email us at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org. We think we're going to keep this going. So let us know what you want to hear, who you'd love to see on the show. We welcome any feedback.
And we just closed our production of Kate Kerrigan's Father-Daughter, the world premiere of that play. And we are gearing up for Jonathan Spector's This Much I Know coming up in February. And we have 2 more shows after that in our 30th anniversary season. So I hope that you will go to auroratheater.org if you have not already purchase a subscription or tickets for the shows and check out what we have coming up. Subscribe if you can, and if you are so moved. And while you're there, you can click on the donate button at the top right. Right now, we have a very generous match from our supporters, Cindy and Stephen Snow. All donations up to $20,000 are going to be doubled from now until the end of the year. So please go to Aurora Theater Company and help us make it through this very difficult time. We appreciate it so much.
Great. So today we're talking about dramaturgy. That's the age-old question. What is a dramaturg? So maybe we should get our guests out here.
Let's do it.
Well, here we go.
So this is Sarah Rose Leonard. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Sarah, you are a dramaturg and a creative producer, and you are currently working with our board member, Lance Gardner, as a live events producer at KQED. And previously, you were the literary manager at Berkeley Rep right next door, and you were the literary associate at Signature Theater in New York. So very distinguished background. And you are now working with Aurora Theater Company as the dramaturg on This Much I Know, our next production, working with me. And it's been such a pleasure so far working with you on this play.
Same.
Well, why don't we just jump right to the question? What is the dramaturg? What does a dramaturg do? What is dramaturgy?
Yeah, well, it's a German word that I wish someone had translated because it doesn't sound great and it confuses everyone and it doesn't translate well. So I'll start there because everyone's like, oh, why does it sound like that? It's German. The first dramaturg was a German person, and in Germany it functions way different than it does here. What we have in the US is kind of I would say like an interpreted version of what dramaturgs in Europe are kind of like what Dawn's job is, an associate artistic director, someone who's holistically really involved in the theater. Dawn might even translate and like do talkbacks and kind of a little bit of everything. And at institutions, dramaturgs can be used that way. It depends on how an artistic director wants to use their dramaturg. Those jobs are usually called literary managers or directors of new play development, literary associates, different titles. A lot of us got furloughed or laid off during the pandemic. So I think we're going to see an interesting change on staff about how dramaturgs or if dramaturgs are used on staff. But usually on staff, that person would be reading new plays, curating a new play pipeline, developing relationships, taking all of the coffees, someone who's trying to figure out, okay, what artists are going to go where in a future season, dreaming forward is what I like to say. which is why I think a lot of us did lose our positions during the pandemic, because there was not a lot of forward to dream about. That's the fun part. There's also, a lot of rejection, sadly, a lot of writing letters about why we can't do a play, or depending on the theater, there's a huge pile of varying sizes that you're never going to get through and you just have to live with. I know we all have a version of that. And then on staff, you're also sometimes writing program notes, doing talkbacks. I have always really enjoyed working with education departments as part of my job, and kind of working with students and making more contextual offerings. And that's the staff part. I could keep going. Yeah. Sometimes you're in a rehearsal room, depends on the position.
Yeah. So, and what about for when it is like a freelance dramaturg where you're hired in for a particular project? What is the role of the dramaturg? Why do productions need to have a dramaturg on board along with your director and your designers and your actors and technicians and everybody else? What's the function of a dramaturg in that situation? Yeah.
And so when I say, like, sometimes a literary manager or that position can be in a room, they kind of switch hats and become a dramaturg. And that is more like what a freelance dramaturg also would do. So you're in the room on a classic play. You would be doing a bunch of research and kind of bringing in what is the historical context of this play. So I like to say my first week of the week of table work, which if you're with a strong director, you're doing really good table work. And that is the first week of rehearsal in which everyone's sitting around a table talking about the play and going kind of beat by beat, like, what is happening here? What am I saying? How do I pronounce that? What was happening in this Russia in 1967? Whatever the thing is, just off the top of my head, not about this much I know at all. And kind of interpreting. And on a new play, you're working with the writer to also kind of be an outside eye. And I like to say, you're an audience, you're trying to be the audience in the room. So I personally like to go away and come back so I can not get too enmeshed in the process. So I can say, like, hey, that actually doesn't make any sense. And here's maybe what we can do about it, kind of giving notes. And in a historical process where there's no writer in the room, I am really there for the director. Ideally, for me as a dramaturg, I like to be a resource for everyone, not like I'm the writer's person, but I'm with the writer, director, designers, and actors as a resource to be like, I can, like, once at Berkeley Up, the props master emailed me to look up something. I don't even remember what it was, but I was like, that's exactly how I want to be used. I want to be someone who all of the knowledge that I've enmeshed for this process can be of use to everyone, or else, like, really, what's the point? And that's why a lot of people think that dramaturgs are not necessary in a room. And I think no one is necessary in every single room. If we're using Peter Brook definitions of theater is an audience and an actor. But I think ideally a dramaturg enriches a process for everyone by being an outside eye, by being a collaborative ear, and by being the glue. That's my favorite way of existing, at least.
Josh, I wonder if I could just lob one your way.
Sure.
Because I'd love to hear, like, how you as a director work with a dramaturg.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends a lot on what kind of play it is, as Sarah Rose was saying. If it's a historical play, like, for example, when the first one that's coming to mind is Wittenberg, which was the first show I directed at Aurora many years ago. So some of you may remember that production, but it was a play about Faustus and Hamlet and Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. And there was a lot of, it was a very funny play, but a lot of the comedy was making jokes, making philosophy jokes, making historical jokes, making jokes, that you had to sort of really know what was going on for it to work. And so we hired a dramaturg who was not somebody who usually works as a dramaturg in the theater, but somebody who was a professor at UC Berkeley, who had that particular set of knowledge that was appropriate for this play. And we've done that a few times at Aurora. We had somebody from, I don't know, for different plays, we've brought in professors for specific things. And so whether it is somebody who's a practicing dramaturg or somebody who just has that cultural and historical knowledge, it's so useful to have somebody who you can just say, hey, what is this line about? Why do they say this? What is he referring to here? And that allows you, having somebody who can answer that in a really knowledgeable way, allows you to tell the story that you're telling with more authenticity and truth and specificity, rather than just being like, well, I'm just going to say these words and hope it makes sense to somebody. It's huge, right? But then on a new play, it's a very, some of that is still true on a new play, depending on the play. This much I know has plenty of historical context that Sarah Rose is going to be helping us out with. But it also, it's a great way to deepen the conversation between the playwright and the director about the story that you're trying to tell together. And the dramaturg is somebody who is often, even if the playwright's not in the room, the dramaturg is often the advocate for the play, right? And can be telling me, hey, Josh, don't forget this thing about the play, is connected to all these other things, and you're sort of not taking into account in the way you're staging the play. Or with a new play, I'm sure that Jonathan Spector and Sarah Rose and I will have many late night arguments about, like, we should cut this. No, we shouldn't, because it's so important for that. How's this going to work? And it's fabulous to have another person whose sole job in the room is making sure that the story is getting told to its fullest extent. And that's everybody else has like their own specific role, that they're either an actor is playing a specific role and they've got to focus on that. The designer has got to focus on, the lights or the costumes, whatever it is. And just having one person who can focus on the play is such a valuable thing.
Agreed.
Thanks, Josh. Damn.
Yeah. How about you, Dawn? Have you had good experiences working with dramaturgs?
I've had fabulous experiences working with dramaturgs. I love working with dramaturgs, and I'd rather work with a dramaturg than not. I've also worked as a dramaturg. I went to a grad program where every production had a dramaturg, so it was it was sort of like baked in the muscles of how to work. And I think for me, because directing can be such a lonely sport, I find like solace in another person who has to be outside of the production, right? Like they will leave it when I leave it. And so they're like such a vital member of the design team, a creative team, because, like at that first design run, and like, the lighting designer's on their laptop because their plot is due. So they're watching for a very specific thing. And like costume designers like, oh, she didn't say she was having the actors do the split. Like other departments are looking for such very specific things that I feel like the most affinity I have is with the dramaturg, because we are trying to look holistically, not that other creatives aren't, but so I've found that after like rehearsals and stuff, it's the dramaturg that like we have those conversations, like you're saying, Josh, and for somebody like me who's worked as a dramaturg, sometimes there is that like, oh, well, like if it's just research, I could do my own research. So it's not that. It is actually about the like somebody else's point of view and the responsiveness and the conversations and I often think of the dramaturg as like my ally, even though I think it's true that they're an advocate for the production. But yeah, I love working with dramaturgs. I wish it were a regularly like I wish every creative team were resourced in a way that allowed for the dramaturg to be present and to be compensated, same as other members of the creative team.
Mm-hmm. Same. And I love what you both just described is a very healthy relationship with the dramaturg. And I'm sure you've also had this where you're kind of in the room, like what you just said, and it's like, here's the history, and then you go away. And there is like this awkward period of time that I personally love, because it's like an evolution time between like, okay, we've done the table work. I like bringing in like guests if I can to talk about specific things in the play. We've kind of dug in, and now it's the director's turn to like make it all happen. It's not mine. But I'm there for the director. And that's like a very subtle shift that I think actors have to start worrying about their lines, and they're kind of off. And everyone, like you said, kind of described on, like, is in their camps. And it's one of my favorite times to be like, oh, like, what do y'all need now? What's happening now? Because it's never the same thing twice, ever. So what you both just described really honors that fluidity.
What do you, what are things that directors have done with you on a project that you've really appreciated? Like what is a good director for a dramaturg?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, one of my favorite projects was with Angels in America at Berkeley Rep with Tony Taccone. Tony really let me have the reins with that first week in terms of bringing us to the world of the play. And I took everyone out. We all had dinner at the house of a donor and their partner who had survived the AIDS crisis. And we start like the first day of rehearsal that night, we all went out to dinner. And that was priority. Like, what was it like to be in this body, in the bodies of the people we're inhabiting in this play at this time, hearing it from people who experienced that time period. And then from there, I brought in some other speakers. We had a fantastic couple of two Mormons come in and talk to us. Like, we just got to draw from people in the Bay Area. And so that was to me a very generous use of a dramaturg that Tony did that really met the enormity of that play. He could have just been like, read your packet. And we made it 3D. We made it a real live experience. And that showed, because like you said early, Josh, like I think you can tell the difference between an actor is saying their lines and they're saying it beautifully versus when they know what that means and they're having a lived experiences. We're humans, we could smell bullshit like right when if it's in front of us, when someone's talking to us. And so that aliveness to me was there in the first week. And with a play with a new writer, or not a new writer, a new play with the writer in the room and with the director, I had this great experience with Henry Godinez and Tony Meneses. Henry's a director and Tony as a writer with this play called 2050. And Henry really understood that the play was going to change and also there were limitations. And he was great about not like putting me on Tony's team and like kind of fighting for rewrites. He really understood like this is the three of us having a conversation together before or after rehearsal. And so there was clear like allyship there. And he would also basically use me as an assistant director, which was, I think, smart, because in moments where that scene was set and we weren't analyzing it anymore and Tony was really sitting back and listening, I could, wheel my chair over to Henry and be like, hey, like, I don't know what's happening there. I can't hear this line, whatever your AD or another eye would essentially hope to catch. So that was one of my favorite ways of being used for a new play.
So Rose, how did you first fall into being a dramaturg, and what attracted you to this role?
This is such a sweet question. I feel like I'm never asked that question, probably because it's talking about myself, which is weird. But I knew that dramaturgy existed because I was in the first class of teen council at Berkeley Rep, right next door, when I was in high school. And so one of the things that then the director of the School of Theater, Rachel Fink, had me do before I left for college, well, one, she had me read a bunch of classic plays because I grew up on new plays. So I thought like new plays were the only thing worth doing truly, like at all. And she was like, please read Miss Julie and like, I don't know, check off. Like I just hadn't read that. And so she sent, for the summer, I had to read all these classic plays. And then she was like, and talk to people on staff. So she like sent me on a tour of what are actual jobs that you can have in the theater. And I talked to Madeline, who later became my boss, who's the dramaturg at Berkeley Rep. And in high school, I curated something called a dramathon, which we raised money to go to New York as a teen council. And we read plays for 24 hours. And I curated that from the stacks in the literary office. So I knew there was a thing. I just I was going to be a director. And I went to school to study directing. And when I came out, I started at UC Santa Barbara and I transferred to NYU. And I came out of college and I was so burnt out and I just didn't know what I wanted. But I knew I still liked reading and writing. That was truly basic. I was like, I hate everything, but I like reading still. And so I applied for literary fellowships because I was like, this is theater, something I just did. And it seems to be just reading and writing. And I got the literary fellowship at Playwrights Horizons in a year where playwrights had a watershed year with Annie Baker's Circle Mirror Transformation and Bruce Norris' Clyburn Park. Like just the theater was changing that year. And so I fell deeply in love. I just absolutely loved it. And I didn't know how I was going to continue doing it. And I didn't still know exactly what it was or what it could look like. But I was like, I love new plays. And I want to figure this out. And then I made it up basically for many, I'm still making it up. I don't know, say for many years, nothing is solved. Yeah.
That's great.
That's how I fell in love with it.
And what does, like, how is that a typical career path for somebody who is a dramaturg? Like it seems like there's probably lots of different ways.
Yeah, there's like, dramaturgs. I mean, this is the cool thing about it, right? Like you said, you pulled in someone who was a professor. There is no path. Like if that person fell in love with it and decided they wanted to do it, they would have to make it up too, no matter if they had a PhD and a job. Like it's all made up. And I love that. I can't really give advice to someone about like what to do. I do think the literary fellowship helps really anyone. To me, it's a liberal arts degree of internships or fellowships because you see what the inside looks like. You're seeing like, what does rejection look like? What does acceptance look like? How does actually anything happen? How does it go to the stage? And it's all and the reading and writing stuff is so fundamental. There isn't a path. I essentially, when I left that fellowship, looked at what Yale required and tried to do it on my own, which was very, like, a lot of chutzpah for me. But I was like, I'll go to grad school if I need to, but I think I can just do this. So the next thing I did was I was done with American plays. I was like, I miss speaking Spanish, which is, I'm in Chile right now, something I love. And I applied for Fulbright to study new plays in Mexico. And I came here where I am right now to stay with my old babysitter who's Chilean and was like, come whenever. And I was like, I'm going to figure out, they say you want to translate to get into Yale. I'm going to learn how to translate. And I didn't get the Fulbright, but I was already finalist. And that thing where you're like, you're already doing the project. Doesn't matter if they've rejected you, you're just doing it. So I did my Fulbright essentially on my own in Chile. Because I was like, I'm gonna get fluent. You say a dramaturg needs to be fluent in a second language. So I'm gonna do that. And that was awesome. But like, again, I made it up. And so then when I went back to New York, I felt like I knew more of what kind of work I liked. It was really important to help me, I guess these days you would call it decolonize my point of view. Because at the time I just had only seen, New York theater and Bay Area theater, obviously, because I was 22. And I studied abroad in Spain, but I don't know, I went to like some weird Sweeney Todd. I didn't know what I was doing in Spain. Don't go to Sweeney Todd in Spain. And I was like seeing a bunch of plays that I thought I didn't like, and everyone loved them. And so I was like, okay, clearly, like if theater is made for people and people are happy, then what am I missing? And I saw a lot of work in Argentina, and it made me really realize, like, if a dramaturg is supposed to have good taste, that has implicit bias by what we mean by good taste. My good taste was formed by downtown New York theater. I stand by a lot of it. And there's also, I know, a whole world of theater that I'm not equipped to understand if it's good or not from my own point of view. Sorry, that kind of went on a sideways direction, but that to me is like, in terms of a path for a dramaturg, is essential. Like just figuring out where my bias is, what do I like and why, and how can I read for someone else? Like if Dawn gave me a stack of plays and I was supposed to find something that I think she would like, I would have to spend a lot of time with Dawn, figure out what she liked, and then I would still get it wrong. But I might have a better chance of guessing, and so I could be a better reader for her. But there's just no way that, and even when audiences think they know what they want, like sometimes you show them something and it blows their mind, and that's the best, right? So being open to that experience. Yeah.
Well, what are some, let's talk a little bit more about what you like about theater, what kinds of plays that you respond to. There are so many, I mean, this is the thing, right? There are so many different types of theater, right? And you know, the sort of regional theater model that Aurora is built around is one kind of theater. It's actually several kinds of theater mashed together, but then there's a lot more. And I love that. And I love that there's different companies doing radically different kinds of work, and different regions doing different kinds of work. And there's different work coming from different cultures. And so how do you, where do you find yourself like most at home and most happy to be working on a particular type of play?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I'm purposely not going to name names here because
sure.
I'll fail someone. But I really love, this is maybe obvious, but I love plays that can only be in the theater, that have aliveness to them, that involve you understanding something in real time, that it's essential that you are breathing at the same time as an actor on stage, and that you're having a communion, a channeling of sorts. And I mean, that to me, a lot of dramaturgs akin the best theater experience to being in a religious setting, in a synagogue or a church or a mosque, like that experience of transformation that is inherently spiritual by being with people in a room and having a shared experience. And it's something that very, very few playwrights can actually write into a play. It's something that can only happen collaboratively. So plays that are inherently striving for that quality. To me, if I open a script and there's a couch, you better do something crazy with it immediately, please, flip the couch. Or it's a classic play and the couch is representing a period of time that we all went through together even if we weren't alive at that period of time, it's part of our shared history. There's a reason that a classic can be done today and still make sense. But I think plays that are happening in real time inherently to me also have to do with language or physicality, losing language and going into movement. Plays that bring in song in ways that aren't feeling, I love musicals. I prefer contemporary musicals that are using song, kind of plays with music versus this is a musical. Plays that are using justly not, not weaving it in, but kind of understanding that we're going into song right now and it might be a little silly, but that are understanding how to use those tools of visual art, music, and poetry, right? That's like the Greek traditional elements of theater in ways that feel really conscious, and knowing that different mediums produce different feelings in an audience. And I'm a true sucker for language plays